All right, we do have to get into this because we got a smaller window with everybody than normal. And gentlemen, breaking news, big news in the game of golf. And I'm not even really exaggerating all that much because today the USGA and the RNA proposed a rule to dun 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 roll back the golf ball. Things that have been discussed and tested for years and years and years became closer to becoming official. I don't even know where to start here. Kyle, I guess I'll just start with you. This bifurcation, that's a word you're going to hear a ton in the next couple of years. So let's get used to that. Bifurcation, which is splitting the game from everybody using the same equipment, from recreational players, amateurs to professionals, into two separate paths. This would allow for a local rule to be put into place where golf ball restrictions would be put on elite golf competitions.
Yeah, I think at some point this has to happen, right? You can't keep lengthening number 13 at Augusta National. You know, they lengthened it for this year. You can't continue to do that for the next. This isn't about, and again, I think the argument that people make is like, hey, things are fine. And it's like, okay, sort of, but what about 100 years from now? Unless you believe that distance is going to stop increasing, which you can make that argument, I guess. I don't think it's a great argument. Then you have to implement some sort of like limit in place. And I thought Mike Wan, I was on the press conference today with Mike Wan and Martin Slumbers, and I thought he was fascinating because he said, you know, this is not like a end all be all solution. This is, we might be back in the same spot 15 years from now. And I thought that was good foresight. And, you know, I thought it was pretty intriguing. One thing that I was thinking about is like, this is so, somebody brought this up, I forgot who, but the fact that you can use your own ball in a professional sport,
it's pretty crazy,
right? I mean, you can make the Tom Brady joke, but like, you can't. What if you could use your own ball in baseball? Like, what if like Rawlings came out with a T94X baseball, and that's what Clayton Kershaw pitched with? That'd be absurd. Like, that would be completely insane. And so I don't really hate the idea of just sort of a uniform ball. I don't know. There's a million directions we could go with that, but I think what they implemented is a good thing.
Yeah, we'll start picking them off here, Greg. The intention of this is to only be adopted in elite competition. It is not intended to impact recreational golf. So the way that they're proposing to do this, the USGA and the RNA, is to have a model local rule, an MLR. That is something else you will hear a lot of in the next couple of years. And this local rule can be adopted by, say, the PGA Tour. And if you play on the PGA Tour, you're playing under this local rule. Or it could be adopted by Augusta National, or Augusta National could say, nah, we don't want anything to do with this. Use the regular balls, use the old balls, right? So this is an attempt to, which I don't think would happen, but an attempt to only address golf balls at the highest possible level.
Yeah, and this is, I think they're going to run into a real problem with this unless everybody can come together and be on board. And for that reason, just imagine this scenario. The PGA Tour decides not to adopt this local rule. Because ultimately, the PGA Tour likes birdies being made. They like guys hitting really long tee shots. They promote that. They don't really grow the rough up a whole lot. They don't set in most of their events. They don't set the golf course up as difficult as it possibly can be set up. They want to see some scoring, particularly on Sundays. So what if the PGA Tour doesn't adopt the local rule and the USGA and RNA do? Are you going to ask an equipment manufacturer to go through research and development and develop an entire line of products for the US Open? And by the way, it's a golf ball you can't sell to the public. So you're going to ask Titleist and Bridgestone and TaylorMade and Callaway to invest this large sum of money, and it's a large sum of money, into a golf ball that they can't sell. That's I think a very difficult ask. And all of a sudden, if the PGA Tour doesn't go with this, you run into a real problem, because who's going to make the ball you've suggested gets made to conform? And I don't know who does it. So they really need the PGA Tour to get it on board if they are going to get on board with this. And if the PGA Tour doesn't really think that it's a problem, then it becomes a problem for the USGA and the R&A. It becomes a really big problem for them. So I ultimately look at this in a much broader scale in the game of golf than the game of golf as an industry as a whole, rather than just the PGA Tour. And you got to look at OEMs. You have to look at players who are trying to qualify for a U.S. Open, amateur players who are attempting to go into college. And there will be to use a Ronald Reagan term, a trickle-down effect on this. And at what point do you decide, as a young, quote unquote, recreational player, at what point do you decide that you're going to go and play the elite game? And are you going to have access to those golf balls to play those golf balls? It's a very complicated thing. And I don't think you can simply draw a line between the PGA Tour, the professional golf world, and everybody else. I don't really think that that's a feasible way of doing things. So ultimately, I think there's a lot of problems in this.
Well, we're going to solve one of those problems right now because we're going to add another voice to the conversation. We've got Mark Immelman here, I believe. There he is. Hello, Mark.
Hey, guys. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Fine. I was listening to Greg's input there, and it's all pretty savvy. Yeah, this is a big deal. I was somewhat surprised when I saw the press release. We didn't know any of this was coming last week, unless I was just very in the dark and wrapped up in my job.
Well, let me throw it right to you, Mark. Get you in the hot seat early here. So obviously USGA and R&A announcing this and also sending these documents to the equipment manufacturers. The equipment manufacturers hate this. They don't want to make another golf ball special for just elite competition, as Greg mentioned. It's not even a ball that you can sell. And I do wonder where we draw the line, right? Augusta National, yeah, obviously. The majors, of course. The PGA Tour, sure. Korn Ferry, yeah, I think that makes sense. What about qualifying? What about sectionals? What about Division I college golf? What about, like, where there is going to be a line somewhere that says this is the line? I have no idea where that's at.
Well, I would probably, right off the top of my head, go with what we've seen in the past. Now, I'm old enough to know back in the day when Callaway came out with a driver called the ERC, that they'd push the limits of MOI at contact, and the way the face reacted with the ball, sort of basically beyond what was legal. And so there was a tournament version of the ERC, and then there was a jacked up version, or something that was really hot that players would use when they weren't playing an event. So I would say they would draw the line right off the bat, probably somewhere at the bottom end of the professional game. If you're in college, the NCAA would govern how they go with things. Kind of like, in college, they use an aluminum bat. Yet when you get in the major leagues, you use a wooden bat. And that, to me, ostensibly is how I see the thing going around. I can understand where the USGA and the R&A came from. I'm glad they finally did, because for the longest time, they were trying to sell us on these studies that they did, where they're like the ball's not going any farther, and they'd suck up these horrid numbers that everyone knew that were just completely out of bounds, really. So now they have identified the issue. There is an issue. If you talk to all the players, they will tell you there's an issue, because they're stronger. They got the Olympic ideal. They're stronger, faster, higher, the whole thing. And so some of the data is off kilter. And the truth of it is, on the tour, or whatever tours, because I'm sure the tours will jump into lockstep, you're going to be long whether using a slowed down ball or a longer golf ball. That's just how it is. Length will still be an advantage. All that I see that's happening with this is it's making a number of the golf courses that have become obsolete real again. And the truth of it is, like, Oh goodness, I'm trying to think of a place like Torrey Pines. That place is mammoth, and I saw guys getting to some of the targets with wedges and stuff even now. So it was getting to a place with the ball getting faster and faster and faster, and these guys getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and with technology and understanding footwork and force production and all that sort of stuff now, because golf has become like a science, that the guys are maximizing that, and so as a result, you have to hem the thing in somewhere. And so I'm glad the governing bodies did it, because in the locker room the players would tell you the same thing. So to what Greg was saying, I'd be surprised if the tour didn't jump on board, and the tour and the DP World Tour work together. So I'm sure the two major tours in the world will be okay with this. Now, Live, maybe they might go with an extra hot golf ball. Who knows? But right now, I think that the PGA Tour will be on board.
Golf but hotter is what they can call it. Kyle, let's close the loop on this for a second here, because there's two things I find really interesting. One, I'm interested in how they do this, right? So from my understanding, the current restrictions around the golf ball are generated on a robot that swings the club at 120 miles an hour. Okay.
Which is absurd.
Just amazing visual already.
Just incredible stuff.
Yes. Now, what they're going to do is they're essentially going to keep those same restrictions, all that fun stuff, but they're cranking the robot to 127 miles an hour. So the ball, in theory, if you swing it at 127 miles an hour, it will act as if you have swung it at 120, which I love that. But that's how they're going to do this. They're trying to target that upper end elite golfer.
Yeah. If you read the press release, you're like, I might not understand English. Like, I don't understand any of what's being said here.
Yeah.
I think Greg's point is really interesting because this was, we never had to explain this very, very much before Live, but now it's like paramount to understand that there are 5 organizations that run golf, essentially. And it would be the weird part about all this is you got the USGA and RNA are in charge. It would be like if the EuroLeague was telling the NBA, like, here are your rules, right? And the NBA is like, wait a second, what? Like, you're telling us what our rule, like and what I mean by that is the USGA and RNA, like they only have one massive event a year, right? And the PGA Tour is the place where the stars play most of their golf, like at least time wise, they play most of their golf. And it's such a weird aspect where you could argue that the USGA is a less powerful organization than the PGA Tour. I don't know if I would make that argument. You could make it, and they're telling the PGA Tour, like, here's your rules, and I know that's how things have always been. It's just like, it's just a strange thing. And I don't know. I'm with Greg. I don't know like how that's going to go for all these different organizations.
So the other thing, Greg, and I and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think the big thing comes back to the golf courses, right? That's what this comes back to. Are we going to be able to go to Marion ever again? What is going to happen when this thing just turns into driver wedge everywhere? What Bryson did to Winged Foot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is likely, or I guess in an ideal world, going to preserve the opportunity to continue to play these elite golf courses without having to get them all back to 8,000 yards, which is not feasible and not that ends up being a slippery slope.
Yeah, although I think that's a misguided thought. I think it's a misguided concept. You look at, first of all, in 2013, there are two sides to this. One, in 2013, Marion was under 7,000 yards and over par was the winning score. The last time there were 3 occasions the winning score was over par. One was at Shinnecock, which was
the fairways were the size of your study in Marion in 2013. I mean, they got to trick places up a little bit to defend par and against these guys if they should.
The other one was the Olympic Club, right, which is 7,100 yards. It's not a very big golf course. I know it plays longer being in California and all that. Shinnecock was the other one, which had insane greens at the time. But you look at Aaron Hills, that was nearly 8,000 yards and 17 under par 1. So distance isn't, to me, distance is not the priority when it comes to difficulty. There are other priorities. Rough is one thing. Trees are a big thing. And as you start to take out more and more trees, which we do in this game, right now the motto is get rid of all the trees. And guess what? When you miss fairways, all of a sudden there's only rough in the way. And now the high clubhead speed has the advantage. So if you want to slow the game down, which is kind of an odd idea that would never play in any other sport. There's no other sport that's looking to slow the game down. And if you want to slow the game down, you can add trees. And all of a sudden you have to be a little more precise, and accuracy becomes something that's a little more important. When you have trees, you also limit the factor of the trampled down rough, which I think Kyle mentioned the other night, right? You have in the game of golf, the bigger you miss, the more trampled down it is in a lot of cases. But when there's a hazard in the air and there's a tree blocking your way, all of a sudden that big miss becomes a bigger penalty. So there are so many different ways that you can design golf courses that will limit distance. There are endless ways you can do that.
So,
and one of them is stop cutting trees down.
If I may, Rolfas, that is a very savvy point. It really is. But with the tightness of money nowadays, people aren't really designing championship golf courses anymore. They're fixing up old places. And they're fixing up old places by making conditions firmer. But you also run into an issue then with summertime rains. PGA Tour, after April, it becomes a scoring bonanza because you can't get places firm because you're going to have an afternoon thunderstorm or two. You saw what it did to the players last week. That place was like an ice rink on Friday morning. Get some rain Friday evening, and the next day it's a freaking birdie fiesta because the guys can hit it along to your point, which I agree with. I mean, I spoke with Finau the one time, and he was like, they could make these courses 8,000 yards. We're still going to shoot the grass off the place unless it's firm with rough. So I'm with you on the rough.
It's always been that way, by the way. So now you're gonna go down this path because you have some golf courses that get soft and scoring gets really low, and you're gonna affect the entire industry in unknown ways. Like, this is not something that has been tested. I know they've looked at data, but they've looked at data and how long the longest players in the world have gotten, and they're looking at it from a perspective of the golf course. I mean, the guy who started this entire process in Mike Davis is a guy that left the USGA to go into golf course architecture. He is a golf course architect. He's looking at it from that perspective, but the perspective of everybody else in the game is a little bit different. It's different, right? The other stakeholders see the value in having PGA Tour players and recreational players playing the same equipment. I mean, it's the pyramid of influence in golf is different than every other sport because the fans of the game play the game. And so all of a sudden, when Justin Thomas is wearing a Titleist hat, it has a tremendous value. When you have that sponsorship on the leaderboard that you were talking about just the other day, Rick, where it tells you how many, what golf ball the guys are playing. Right. That sponsorship carries a value because as a consumer, you say, oh, wow, look at how many guys on this leaderboard are playing a Titleist golf ball. Maybe I should too. But when that ball gets changed and you aren't going to play the ball that they play, it loses a lot of value for the PGA Tour because now all of a sudden their players and their sponsorships become a little bit less valuable.
Let me get Kyle in here real quick, Mark. We got 10 more minutes with him. So KP. Couple of things here. You are good at comparing what's going on in golf to other sports. There is no other sport that is trying to make it harder to score. Baseball has implemented a ton of rules this offseason to make offense more important. They have not extended the length of a basketball court because it takes LeBron James 3 steps to get from end to end. If we care about scoring, wouldn't it the cheapest option be to change a par 72 into a par 68? Like, have I just solved golf's problem?
And by the way, the USGA does the USGA does that.
Yeah. They do.
They always change par.
But changing par is like the solution to everything, I think, right?
Right, like literally, if it's a par 70 instead of a par 72 and the winning score is 6 under, do we hear about this instead of being 18 under or 20 under?
Say that again. If the par,
Yeah, if they make instead of par 72s, for example, they're par 70s, and now the winning scores are single digits under par instead of deep into double digits. Like, I feel like it's not the distance, it's the scoring that people see and people care about. They say courses are getting shredded, so they must be too easy. The easy point is to say distance is crazy, when really if distance can be the same, just make them par 70s or par 68s.
yeah, I think. Well, the other thing you could do, many people have said this: just get rid of tees, ban tees. That would be truly sick.
I'm sure that I'm confident that's been spoken about.
That would be nuts.
That would be
sweet.
Put
a lock regulation in there.
Football, they used to kick the thing off the ground. Now they got a big tee like this. They can kick the thing out of the end zone nearly every single time. The kickoff guy.
Ban tees. I'm in. So the thing, Rick, about other sports is like golf is defenseless, right? In baseball, you have a pitcher. In football, you have a cornerback. In basketball, you have a center, a power forward, all defending the offensive player, and all sort of evolving at the same rate that the offensive player is evolving at. In golf, the defense is the golf course, which has to, like, it can't evolve, right? I mean, you can plant trees. I don't know that we want to plant trees at like the old course, right? I don't know if like that's the greatest evolution of St. Andrews. And so there has to be some sort of third party that is like serving as the like helping the golf course in its defense of players. If that
it's like a public attorney.
Kyle,
kinda, yeah.
Kyle, that is a fantastic point. I mean, because you say that, and I get to thinking, I'm like, if this wasn't really that important, the Augusta National, you wouldn't see them buying some of Augusta Country Club's land to make number 13 longer. If you couldn't make that a par 4, that would be sacrilegious. So you're right; it's defending the golf courses. That's a great point.
And I don't know if it's necessarily about scoring, because I think that scoring can be hard on short holes, right? Like short par 4s, like we see them, like it's very difficult to score on some of those holes a lot of the time. I think it's more about, this is going to sound like old man of me, but like sort of the integrity of the way the courses were meant to be played, right? I don't think 16 at Sawgrass was meant to be like driver sand wedge like Rory hit last week or somebody hit into that hole. And so it's more like, can we go to St. Andrews 20 years from now and anybody hit more than like 8 iron?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and I just don't know that that's like, I think what the USGA and RNA are trying to do is preserve this is again, like sort of out there, but preserve like the beauty of the way the game is played. And that sounds high-minded, but I think there is a little bit of that going on here.
I would add to that, preserve some of the relevancy of the record books. Because let's say,
absolutely,
Andrews in 20 years' time, and you guys have they'd be driving it over number 1 the way things are going now if they could get a correct wind. So yeah, Kyle, the points you make there are so on the mark. And those two governing bodies, they are the custodians of the game, and the game just isn't the PGA Tour players; it's the defense of the great pallets, the great golf courses. These guys get to show off their skills on places where, and you talk to everyone, they're like, so what makes St. Andrews or Augusta National, whatever, great? They're like, because I'm playing from the same place that whoever did back in the day, Ben Hogan. And so your point there is that's nailed, man.
Who will be the first guy to accidentally grab up a golf ball out of his bag? It'll be the wrong ball, and he flies it 25 yards further than everyone else, and we're like, what?
DJ's gonna have 3 balls.
They're gonna have.
He's got a live ball.
We're gonna have to color code these things.
But think about this for a minute, right? Think about governing this, because remember when a couple of years ago they came out with the blocks, or the players couldn't carry the greens maps on the PGA Tour because they had these massive printouts that basically told you exactly the slope of the green wherever you want it to be. And they'd sit there and just kind of chart their golf ball and go, oh, from here, it's a 2% break. Then they'd aim point the thing and they'd make putts from all over the joint. So the tour goes, no, you don't have that anymore. But I wonder who was marshalling the thing. So yeah, there's going to be someone who does the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Did you see?
I do wonder who's marshalling the thing.
Did you see the comment that somebody said, "How does this affect distance per shot?"
Yeah, I did see that. It was really good. That we have single-handedly already blown up SI Golf's world ranking calculation. All right,
I wish I would have thought of that.
So here's where we're at. I'm gonna get Kyle out of here in a second, but this will now enter a feedback stage where manufacturers and golf stakeholders can provide feedback until August 24th. If adopted, this will take place January 1st, 2026, which is about, 2 years and 9 months from now. So something we'll be talking about moving forward.